The idea of karma and how it plays out in human interactions through the law of karmic consequence is universally recognized. What you put forth comes back to you. But while most people accept the idea of karma, how many of us understand how it works? Wouldn't it be helpful if you did? Imagine how understanding the mechanics of karma would allow you to monitor and then modify your thoughts, words, and deeds to affect a more positive outcome in all your business and personal interactions, including those you have with yourself. Imagine how your life might change. Such an understanding is what I hope to explore with you in this video. I'll be reading from my book, The Totality of God and the Izunome Cross. The section begins on page 654 of the main text, but is also available on my site, totalityofgod.com, as a free download. I want to be clear, as I am throughout my book, that what I'll be sharing in this video and all the others I'm creating are merely my thoughts on universal truth, and I don't expect you to accept them as any more than that. They are based on what I learned about the energetic nature of the universe while writing my book, and which I detailed and substantiated in my video series, The Four Pathways. You may ask how I could know that any of the things I've written about universal truth are true. Some may even question my audacity for making such a claim. To all I would say, first you have to be familiar with my personal spiritual journey as shared in my book to understand where all of this is coming from. And even then it is a stretch without having personally lived it. To that I will then add, if you can, watch the videos and read my articles with an open mind and heart and allow your personal inner guidance to process them. Explore for yourself what I've written. Through experience, its veracity may be revealed. But if it doesn't feel right or make sense to you, that wouldn't preclude it from being a reflection of universal truth, or at least from being truthful for someone else. As a later video will explore, the paradox of true and false is that the universe allows for both to coexist. And when one can be upheld in any given circumstance, the potential is still there to uphold the other. By the point in my book's journey where the laws of karmic response and responsibility appear, it should be very clear there are precise energetic laws underlying all that exists and that transpires in the universe. Science has done much in determining the physical laws involved. It has been among my goals to help clarify and perhaps even reveal core spiritual laws to which all things are likewise beholden. Since spiritual precedes physical, we must learn how to live in accordance with the spiritual laws if we hope to make positive physical changes in our lives. The first step in that process is becoming well-versed in the laws themselves. I'll begin by summarizing them for later reference. You'll hear mention of the idea of spiritual responsibility. This is because karma is a spiritual law, and hence it is spiritual responsibility that determines karmic outcome. And so now I present the laws of karmic response and responsibility. First law of karmic response. The interaction of two or more people results in a karmic response, according to the second and third laws, for all involved in the exchange of spiritual energy. Second law of karmic response. The doer of an action earns a karmic response of like charge, with that being a function of both the action and the intention. Third law of karmic response. The receiver of an action earns a karmic response commensurate with reaction, with that being a function of both the reaction and the intention. First law of karmic responsibility. Whenever a reaction occurs as a result of another person's action, the doer of the action, through thought, word, or deed, bears sole spiritual responsibility for why the reaction has occurred. But the receiver bears sole spiritual responsibility for how. Second law of karmic responsibility. A person has the choice to either accept or reject another person's spiritual energy, regardless of its charge. Third law of karmic responsibility. As long as circumstances permit, all charges of those involved are reversible throughout and beyond the duration of interaction. The law of karmic consequence, when seen as a spiritual law, mandates that spiritual response is a result of and in the same energetic form as spiritual action. And, while the spiritual law of multiple return allows for a greater than equal response, karmic consequence acknowledges the spiritual balance of energies, and as such is the counterpoint to the physical balance of energies, equal but opposite, Newton's third law of motion. In either case, the doer of the action receives the reaction. In Newton's law, the physical reaction is exerted by the thing being acted upon. In karmic law, the spiritual response comes from the universe. Now, regardless of whether you consider spiritual or physical laws, an action leads to a reaction. Therefore, from a philosophic viewpoint, when a reaction takes place as a result of an action, the action is the reason why it has occurred. However, the reaction itself points to how it has occurred. It is here where spiritual and physical laws begin to differ. First, it's because of the inherent difference in the nature of spiritual and physical energies. That should be clear from my previous comments. And second, it's because there is no predetermined reaction to an action when the intervention of personal will is considered. In all the laws of physics, defined through precise mathematical formulas, what you insert into one side of the equation determines exactly what comes out of the other side. There is no guesswork here or room for the whim or judgment of the physicist. But no such precise equations can be found to describe the interaction of human energies that have spiritual as well as physical components. Of course, since all things contain these, one can say the laws of physics likewise have spiritual components. Scientists may wish to debate my last claim, but to that end I must simply encourage them to read the context that my book provides for it. And it was this interrelationship, according to the principle of balance and the law of order, that allowed us to make intuitions about either one in the context of knowing the other. The latter are two of the laws of being in existence, which are covered in another video. Still, the physical order within the universe mandates there is no choice but to act according to its laws for physical energy. But will is a spiritual energy, introducing the element of options in an action. It is will that necessitates the consideration of additional karmic laws, which I have intuited to help explain the processing of karmic energy. 3 concern karmic response, and 3 karmic responsibility. We will focus on the karmic response and responsibility incurred through negative spiritual energy, but the principle of balance upholds these laws working equally well when the spiritual energy involved is positive. And perhaps down the road we'll discuss the difference in the cosmic credits earned for the good deed done in silence versus the one publicly recognized, or the cosmic debt accrued for the physical blessings one receives. There are myriad possibilities within the range of values covered by the laws of karmic response and responsibility. While these laws provide guidelines for actions that occur between 2 or more people, obviously, any solo action will likewise have a karmic consequence. Truly, no action occurs alone. The other person involved is the universe itself, since nothing occurs outside of it. The laws of karmic response and responsibility would then apply with the action and intention of the universe, either as doer or receiver, totally in keeping with universal truth. It is only human will that could countermand a spiritually correct action as the doer or reaction as the receiver. In the context of human interaction, the first thing that must be made clear is that any physical action, as well as its physical reaction, can independently contain either a positive or negative spiritual charge. For instance, many a well-intentioned action has resulted in a negative reaction. Conversely, an action filled with malicious intent may not garner the negative reaction desired. These are the variations allowed by human will. Thus, the previous 6 laws are designed to apply to all combinations of possibilities. No reference is made to the type of charge occurring, only to the fact that such a charge exists, and that it will earn a karmic response and involve a karmic responsibility. A physical action results in a physical reaction from the person or thing being acted upon. Such an interaction of physical energies occurs according to physical laws. However, each physical action or reaction has a spiritual energy associated with it. It is that energy to which these 6 karmic laws apply, and why both action and intention garner a karmic response. Let's consider an example to see how they do so. Suppose a person said something to make you feel guilty, either for an action you took or for one you failed to take. Chances are you'd experience a disturbance in the energy surrounding your second energy center, or lower abdomen, which could physically manifest, depending on the specifics, in a variety of ways. Obviously, it could also affect your spiritual, emotional, or mental well-being. But, although you have reacted to the other person's action, whenever 2 or more people interact, according to the first law of karmic response, all involved earn a karmic response from the universe. Let's next ponder who is responsible for the universe's response. According to the first law of karmic responsibility, the other person is spiritually responsible for why a physical reaction has occurred, in this case, guilt. Thus, the second law of karmic response tells us the doer of an action will earn a karmic response that's a function of both the action and the intention. Consider the latter. If that person's intention was to make you feel guilty, then it doesn't matter whether you accept that guilt or not. The universe will respond to the person's intention. Considering the action is a bit trickier, since the universe will determine the extent of the negative spiritual energy attached to it. For instance, say that the other person may not have had the intention to make you feel guilty, but a reaction of guilt occurred. Only the universe could judge if the words spoken were of themselves spiritually negative. If not, though the doer is still the reason why guilt happened, no negative karmic response is earned by that person for it, only by you for the reaction. But if the words are spiritually negative, the universe will then negatively respond, only to a different degree than if both action and intention were negative. Thus, the universe responds not just to the intention behind an action, but to the action itself, since each has a spiritual energy. The lesson for us is to be mindful of both. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin, the receiver of the action. The first law of karmic responsibility also says that when a physical reaction has occurred, it is the receiver of the action who bears spiritual responsibility for how. In our example, you are responsible for the guilt you experience and for the negative spiritual energy that, according to the third law of karmic response, is commensurate with it, which is a function of both reaction and intention. but the response earned is now yours. The second law of karmic response has already dealt with the doer of the action. For instance, if the intention was to make you feel guilty, but that feeling resulted in such inner turmoil as to cause you to harm yourself in some way, the first law of karmic responsibility would hold you accountable for the extent of the reaction. That would be in the reaction itself as well as the intention behind it, since both have spiritual energy. As far as the reaction is concerned, self-harm would have greater spiritual negativity than guilt. As we move toward intention, the spiritual energy would be different if the harm was accidental or deliberate. The intention behind a reaction, though, can go even deeper. Perhaps it was for sympathy from the doer or from others. Or maybe it was to make that person feel guilty for the initial action. All these reactions have a spiritual energy. Now, if your reaction comes in the form of a counteraction directed at the doer, say in the form of revenge, to cite an example, you become the new doer and the second law applies to you. Of course, in the original example, you would only feel guilty if you allowed the other person's comment to affect you. That's one of the variations in karmic consequence the second law of karmic responsibility takes into consideration. According to it, you have the choice to either accept or reject the spiritual energy associated with another person's action. This is what ultimately determines how something spiritually affects you. In other words, you determine if the reaction is one of guilt. For now, let's assume you have accepted the negative energy sent you. Thus, following the first law of karmic response, both have suffered in the exchange of energy. The doer according to the second law of karmic response for the negative action, and you according to the third law of karmic response for the negative reaction. This would be so even if that reaction is merely to accept the other person's negative energy. Again, in this case, an attempt to make you feel guilty. But, as long as circumstances permit, the third law of karmic responsibility allows for the reversal of both the action and the reaction to increase the overall positive energy. An exception would be a drastic or irreversible event. Thus, either person can heal the loss in spiritual energy to their individual or mutual benefit. Moreover, the opportunity to reverse spiritual energies is available even beyond the duration of interaction. For instance, the guilt you may have experienced initially will be yours only as long as you choose to hold on to it. Similarly, the person who made you feel guilty in the first place may have a change of heart and ask for your forgiveness, thereby helping to reverse the negative spiritual charge associated with their initial action, as well as the karmic response associated with it. Earlier, I mentioned that it is the receiver of the action who bears spiritual responsibility for how. This differs from physical responsibility for how it occurred. If a person hit you, they caused the initial pain you experienced. Any additional pain will depend on your physical reaction. You could leave and put ice on the bruise, or you could strike back. One reaction may lessen the physical pain, and one may increase it. Both have a spiritual component that result in a karmic response and for which you bear sole responsibility. But in either case, the two participants share in the responsibility of how the hit physically affected you. In fact, in the context of a larger chain of events, you may share in the physical or spiritual responsibility for why the hit occurred. Physical responsibility would exist if the hit was provoked, but not spiritual, since the other person has the choice to strike back. However, from a spiritual perspective, a hit, even unprovoked, can be seen as the universe's way of providing you with a spiritual lesson based upon your own previous actions. I'd like to expand a bit here on what I wrote in my book. My last statement suggests that in the context of a larger chain of events, you might share in the spiritual responsibility for why the hit occurred. This might seem to contradict the first law of karmic responsibility, which states the doer bears sole responsibility for why. Please realize that karma is a spiritual energy field extending throughout time and space, much as does any scientifically established physical energy field. So, everything that has occurred, is now occurring, or will occur in our lives must be seen as interfacing with it through the principle of cause and effect, and hence nothing occurs by accident. Therefore, there is an aspect of our personal spiritual responsibility for why something has occurred in everything. Given this understanding, the laws of karmic response and responsibility were intuited by me to explain the mechanics of any specific or microcosmic interaction in that general macrocosmic context. It is in the microcosmic interaction between two or more people, or yourself in the universe, where free will intervenes. And while the wheel of karma has set the play in motion, the players ultimately determine what transpires. It is then when the doer, through choice, bears sole spiritual responsibility for why. And if the potential receiver, as a result of the doer's inaction, fails to learn the intended karmic lesson, it is held in the timeless consciousness of the karmic field until it is resolved in some other way. Moreover, events don't necessarily transpire only for our own benefit. So, considering that the first law of karmic response provides for all involved in an interaction to receive one, it may be that inaction on the part of the potential doer served to resolve a karmic issue for that person. We can thus see how karmic interplay is a truly complex process, but it nonetheless can be analyzed and mitigated according to these 6 simple laws. This concludes for now my exploration of the laws of karmic response and responsibility. And I hope my video has benefited you in some way. Till the next time, I'm Leone.